Mitchell, you did something awesome. You commented. And I want to respond to your comment. You actually had some kind, gracious words. Namely, you saw a video that I shot and considered it to be an unbiased perspective, and I want to weigh in on that. So, 2 questions to raise, really kind of 2.5 questions to raise. Question number 1, do you think, is it possible for anyone to be without bias? That will necessitate us defining bias. So let me quickly define bias as I'm hearing it used on Google. Bias could be loosely defined as prejudice in favor of or against a particular person, thing, group, as compared to another group or thing or person, usually in a way that's considered to be unfair. So partisanship, partiality, favoritism, sway, spin, all these are forms of bias, right? Or synonyms for the word bias. I would argue that this is somewhat incomplete. I think this identifies really what I would refer to as pathological bias. But I think if we broaden our definition just a bit to thinking of it more of a spectrum, where we have the pathological Donald Trump, sexist, racist, cult leader-ish, rigid fundamentalist kind of thinking, that narcissist land over here. In this category, that pathological bias, it's typically easily identified. You can generally, for the most part, the average person can go, wow, that seems pretty biased. Okay, maybe not the average American, and that's what scares me with the upcoming elections. Okay, no politics. I'm not going to talk about politics, but okay. That's bias on one end. Extreme pathological end. On the other end, if we think spectrum, in the most basic benign form, bias is merely preference, perspective, worldview, the things that encompass your way of being in the world. So your family of origin, the way you were raised, the culture you were raised in, both micro and macro culture, your education and how that influenced you, the books you read, the mentors you had, the relationships you've had, all these things that basically lump onto your you-ness, the stuff that makes you you, that really makes you human. Is it pathological? Not necessarily. In fact, to be without it is perhaps not to be human. It seems robot-like to not have a perspective or a preference. I mean, do you prefer Rocky Road or strawberry rhubarb ice cream? Is that a flavor? I don't know. I think I would go with Rocky Road. Or Stephen Colbert's flavor. I mean, right? What is your preference? That's part of what makes you uniquely you. And stepping into that fully, I think, is a good thing, not a pathological thing. It's a healthy thing. So I would advocate that we need to think of this in terms of spectrum. And so is it possible to be without bias? Not if you define it as a spectrum, nor should we aim to be without this form of bias. But I think rather we should be asking the question, does something push me in one direction or the other? Right? Does this rigid set of beliefs that I'm holding to cause me to become more pathologically biased, or help me have a healthy bias? I think that's a question to ask. Or even in terms of people you meet, relationships you have. Does it push you in one direction or the other? Well, there you have it. Move towards the non-pathological, healthy forms of bias, right? That's my take. Sticking with it. Thanks for tuning in. Mitchell, thanks for commenting. And please, what do you think? What do you think about this? Let's make this interactive. Audio.